What's up everyone, it's Nick, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make chord progressions. We're going to cover a wide variety of genres, so hopefully we'll find a style that resonates with you. We're also going to go over what I consider the different levels of chords, from dyads and triads, which are our 2-note and 3-note chords, to extended chords, which involve more notes, and we'll cover some inversions and some rhythmic components that make chord progressions interesting. Let's take a listen to the chord progressions we're covering. Awesome. If you like what you heard, be sure to download the free Midi files. I made extra variations for each genre. There's 50 chord progressions in total. You can get that at the top right of the screen. You don't need a keyboard for this tutorial because we're going to be using piano roll. And even though this is in Ableton, the knowledge is universal. This applies to any DAW. So let's begin with pop. The main reason I chose pop to start with is because it has one of the most common chord progressions, if not the most common, and what we refer to as the 1, 5, 6, 4. You'll figure out what those numbers mean in a second. So here's the progression. For the instrument, you can tell I have a piano. I have a piano V from V Collection, and it's a really nice emulation of the grand piano. So let's start this chord progression in a new clip. I'll double click here in the session mode, and now we have one measure here. So a chord progression is generally a series of chords that make up a journey or story. Right now, with the length of one measure, we're not going to be able to really tell a story. So I'm going to go to the length here and switch to 4 measures right off the bat. For most of these chord corrections, we're going to use longer phrases like multiple measures, 4 to 8 measures. The other thing you need to know about chord progressions is that they're all generally in a key signature. And for most of these chord progressions, we're going to be using the diatonic scale, meaning a 7-note scale, and mainly the major and minor scale. So the pop progression is in the major scale, and the easiest major scale is going to be C major. The reason being that this is all the white notes on the piano. So if you find C, which is marked in our piano roll right here, so all the white notes starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are in what we call the C major scale. The reason that's important is our chord progressions are going to kind of fit into the scale. They're going to adhere to the scale. So there's a few techniques like folding, which I'll explain in a second, that can make this scale process easier. But for now, I think the C major scale is pretty easy to look at on piano roll. Again, it's all the white notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to start referring to the notes here as numbers because that's going to allow us to transpose to different scales. And a lot of the chords are going to revolve around these numbers as well. So to start this progression, I called it 1, 5, 6, 4. So let's think about that. That means if I said that we know this is 1, I'm going to put the 1 right here, and that's going to be what we call our root note of a chord. So the root note is generally the bottom note, and chords are built on these kind of thirds, or skipping every other scale degree. So this is the 1, that's a 2, 3, and that's what we consider a third. And that's already kind of happy sounding. But let's not even worry about the chord yet, and let's just nail down the root note. So the root note's going to be C, which is 1, and then I'm going to count down to 5. 1, 7, 6, 5. And I'm going to put this now on the next white note. This is considered 6. Zoom in a little bit here. And now you can kind of probably hear that the note wants to go down. So that's 5, 4. So this is what I mean by the progression is 1, 5, 6, 4. So those numbers refer to the bottom note of the chord or the root note and what scale degree it's on. The base level of harmony is actually when we add in a second note. And as soon as I do that, Option drag, and I'm gonna put it on the third, which is again 1, 2, 3. We skip a scale degree to make chords, essentially. You just do every other scale degree. So this is now considered what we call a dyad, where there's 2 notes. That's the first kind of layer or tier of harmony. There's 2 voices. And if I use Option drag, I can just like, see, this is the next white note. Does it sound good? Sounds a little close. And we know, I'm telling you that the root position or your basic level chords, and now what we're about to form is a triad, are built out of skipping every other scale degree. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So now I'm gonna do the same kind of logic on each of these bass notes. So I'm gonna skip that one, put that there. Skip this one, put that there. Again, I'm looking for the lighter gradients because in this case, I know I'm in C major. So I'm gonna do the same thing all the way throughout. And a nice technique for this pop chord progression can be to double the bottom note or the bass note, even 2 octaves down. And if I use Option drag, that adds a nice richness to the bottom end and feels a lot more full. We can also space this out twice as long. Length is very important in the chord progression. So I'm gonna take this brace and stretch it so now that each chord lasts a full measure. And even though this is in C major, we do have a kind of sad feeling chord on this third chord. And the reason is you can hear, if I move this middle note up, now this is out of the key, this is using a black key, but listen. Sounds a little more happy. And we're gonna realize later that the third or the middle note really dictates if the chord is major or minor. Cool, so let's move on to our second genre, which is trap. And now, speaking of major and minor, we're gonna switch into the minor key, but we're gonna still use all the white notes, so it's gonna be still pretty easy. So let's hear our trap beat. For the trap beat, I have an operator with a little effects processing to give it a mellow sound. So to make any kind of genre a little darker, we can go to the minor key. So in the first example, we use C major, which was an easy scale using all the white keys. If we just shift down 3 notes, so this is C, so we go down to B and then to A. Now we're not counting this black key because it's not in the scale. 3 scale degrees is the minor scale. If we just go down 1, 7, 6, find where 6 is in the major scale, that 6 can now become our 1 of the minor key. So if we think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Again, easy because we're in A minor. As soon as we go to say B minor or G minor, then we start using those accidentals or the black keys. So for this trap beat, I'm gonna use starting on 1, and we kind of want to create, again, the same structure. We go start on 1, skip a note, and skip a note. All right, so we have our first chord, which is the minor 1. We're thinking this is 1. So let's go ahead and set our length to 4. We'll do a 4 measure chord progression. And I want this to last the full measure. I could even maybe option drag. Here's a trick we can do is once you set up the first chord, option drag to another root note that we know is in the scale. Sounds dark, doesn't sound quite right. That kind of sounds nice. And that's because all the notes are actually lining up on the white keys or in A minor. So actually, let's put this on D. Let's hear how that sounds. Yeah, that still feels like it has somewhere to go. We're gonna realize that going to the 5 chord or the 5th scale degree again, so this is 1, 7, 6, 5. So if we started on that E, Kind of feels like it's climaxing already. Especially if we move this to this G sharp. And actually, let's put that tension right there. So I'm going to do the E there. Let's hear how it sounds with that E major. So now we're technically borrowing one note from outside of the A minor scale, but it's a safe note to borrow because it leads nicely into that A, or the home bass, the 1. And I'm going to take the D and just kind of duplicate it. So now this progression is considered, if we're thinking numbers and we wanted to transpose to a different key, this is the 1. This is down to 7, 6, 5, 4, 5, 4. So 1, 4, 5, 4. And now I'm going to tell you actually how to distinguish a major and a minor chord based off its structure. So a major, we've got what we call the root note. That's what we've been doing. And the third, we haven't really worried how far it is, but if we think that now we're thinking semitones, every note, not just the scale notes, but every chromatic step or every note on the keyboard. So if we think semitones, this is 3 semitones away. So we start on the root note, we go 1, 2, 3. That is the structure of a minor chord. So the root note and the next note up, if it's 3 semitones away, that's the structure of a minor chord. Now if we move that to 4 semitones, it's happy and it's like major. So 4 semitone distance between the root note and that second note of the chord is considered a major chord. So notice that top note is considered the 5th of the chord because it's 5 scale degrees away from the root of the chord. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it doesn't change from major to minor. It's consistent. So the root and the top, the bottom and the top of the chord are consistent in structure. The third, the middle, changes the quality. That's important to know. So this is minor 1. That is minor 4. This is, now that distance is 4 semitones. So now I know this is a major chord. So major 5. And then minor 4. Roman numerals are very useful for expressing major or minor because we can use a lowercase Roman numeral number to signify it's minor and an uppercase Roman numeral to signify if it's major. So notice now I'm taking maybe a middle note and putting it at the bottom. Now we're considering what's called inversions. We're changing up the order of the chord. Maybe I'll take the B here. Cool, moving on, let's go to reggaeton. In this, I use an instance of Atmosphere with the hang drum preset. And so now in this one, I want to showcase how you can make a chord progression using arpeggios, which simply means the chord is played one note at a time, almost like a melody, one note rather than blocked all together. We're going to stick to our easy key of A minor. We're going to, again, maybe do 4 measures, so length 4. And the notes aren't, I don't want them too fast, like this might be too fast. That could be too much energy, so I'm going to do what's called 8th notes, and we're going to take them and space them, again, skipping every other note, and even keep going higher. So this is A, C, E. This is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we want to go back to the 1 up at the top. 6, 7, 1, the A again. And maybe just to give the rhythm feel, go up to the, what we consider the third, the 1, 2, 3. And come back down. So this, even though it's technically not polyphonic, where all the harmony lines up together, it's still outlining a chord. So I'm just gonna duplicate that, Command D. And for this one, I kind of want to go up in structure. So I'm gonna duplicate it, but then use the up arrow key and Notice as I move it up, some of the notes aren't following on what we call the scale degrees. They're gonna sound bad because they're kind of pushed off. I could maybe change them so that they fall on that white key, or I'm just gonna maybe find a spot like right here that they all line up on the white keys. If this is the 1 chord or the first scale degree, 1, 2, 3, then D is the 4 chord or the 4th scale degree. And it's nice to maybe do an A, B, A phrasing, meaning it's like one thing that's the same, it's the same, something unique, but back to the same. And I'm just gonna take this pattern here, highlight and option drag. So again, we can maybe add an organ or something that's playing the harmony all at once polyphonically, but this is a nice way to outline a chord progression without necessarily using polyphony. Great, so now let's look into hip hop. For this progression, we're still in A minor. We're either gonna be in A minor or C major for most of these, but what I wanted to highlight is the unique rhythm. Now, up until this point, we've been using these triads, these 3-note chords, pretty much so that each chord takes one measure. And that's very standard feeling. It feels great, but I would argue you can come up with a lot of flavor using a very, what I consider beginner stock level chord progression by spicing up the rhythm of the chords. So for this hip hop chord progression, I'm actually only using 2 chords, the 1 chord and the 5 chord. So the first, based off the 1st and the 5th scale degree, but it still has a great energy because I'm syncopating it or putting the rhythm on the weaker beats, and it sounds nice because I'm also using an inversion. So let's take a look at this one. For this, I'm actually gonna only use a 2-measure chord progression because I'm gonna repeat it. It has a little more syncopation, so it can be a little shorter, plus the BPM is a little slower for this genre. The instrument I have for this is an organ preset within Analog Lab, and it sounds nice and kind of old school to me. Let's start with our 1 chord. Notice I've been starting with 1 chord a lot. You don't always have to. We're gonna see in a few chord progressions that you can lead to the 1 chord, sounds really nice. But for learning purposes, it's nice to really center yourself around that 1 chord. That's where we really wanna emphasize as home. So I'm gonna put this is what we've been doing so far. Should be now pretty familiar. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's the 1 chord. It's minor. But right off the bat, I'm gonna syncopate it. Right off the beat. And I'm gonna double it up right here. And I could even make this shorter. Sustain's really important for chords. And actually, I wanna do it the other way around. Long, short. Still needs to be a little space. And then right here, I'm gonna take the same structure. I said it was 1 and 5. I'm gonna option drag it to up to 5, so it sounds like this. Now, here's the thing about inversions. I had mentioned that inversions can reorder the chord. The reason that's useful is you can make chord progressions less distracting, more like a good background or bed for a melody by cleverly using these inversions. And what I mean this is right now, look how much distance travels between this chord. It goes from A, and then the top range here is B. So that's a pretty high frequency range. That makes mixing it harder. It's gonna take up more frequency range to compete with your other instruments. So if I simply take the top notes here and use shift arrow key down, that's an inversion. Still the same chord. It's still the 5 chord. Now the 5 is, or the E is not on the bottom of the chord, which still makes it more interesting and a different type of flavor. And we're gonna syncopate that by holding option and dragging it. Right there. Let's make that shorter, because sustain. And this is what... And then I think I hear, again, that kind of pattern right here. And I can maybe get a little fancy now, and what we do with inversions is do what's called voice leading. So I might put this one, I might put up to G, and maybe this one up to A, so that it kind of forms a tiny melody at the top of the chord. I think going up to the A is a little distracting, so I may go down to maybe the C. By putting that on the D, I'm technically making a new chord. So I'm not making an inversion. I've changed this now to the 1. Now this is the 7 chord, but my ear likes it. It likes it a lot. Yeah, I kind of like it because it gives a little longer journey, more flavor, and a little more complexity. Moving on to deep house. I had mentioned that not all chord progressions need to start on 1, and this is one of the ones that I kind of chose to lead to 1. So let's take a listen. Cool, so for this instrument, I have a piano V from V Collection as well, that deep house grand piano feeling. So this chord progression starts on 6, goes to 7, and leads to 1, so 6, 7, 1. This is also a very common pop progression, and as you see, most of these chord progressions are not limited to one genre. It's actually was really hard for me to kind of pick specific chord progressions for genres because they're pretty interchangeable. So let's look at a technique that'll help us maybe eliminate non-chord notes. So far, it's been really easy to do this because we're using the white keys. But say I want to do this now in C minor. So I'm gonna kind of throw a curveball here and I'm gonna do our scale, which I know is all the white keys. So here's the technique. That is A minor, because I know it's all the white keys starting from A to A. I'm gonna then highlight all of them, Command A, and then move it up to C. So that's there, and now it's on C. Notice it's not all the white keys, that makes it a little harder. There's some accidentals in there. But what we're gonna do is we're just gonna shorten this, move it over, and I'm gonna use Option Drag to kind of create more octaves. Option Drag. You've probably seen this technique before, but it's good to review. And once you've gotten, this is 3 octaves worth of these scale notes in the piano roll, I'm gonna then use my arrow key to the left and move it in what I call the nether regions, the upside down, if you will, and then fold it. And now all these are in C minor. This is my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Continuing on. So I said this progression is 6, 7, 1. So here's 1. We know C is 1. This is 7, 6. And when we fold it, this is what I didn't want to confuse you, but now we know that every note is a scale degree. So to make these chords, we're literally just going to skip every other space. That's pretty long. So that's a chord. Let's hear how that sounds. And I'm going to put this a little longer. I'm gonna syncopate it every 3 16th notes, and let's make the length here 4 measures. So, and now what is nice about folding this and like folding this system is if I use Option Drag, it is gonna stay in key no matter what, because we've already kind of locked down the piano roll. And I'm just gonna, and that's 6, 7, 1. It leads into 1. And I kind of just did a kind of syncopation rhythm here. And I think I'm gonna do the same thing right here. But then this chord go to 7. So this is 6, 7, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 7. So it kind of leads back to a looping point where it can go back to that. So I'm gonna duplicate that. And that's in the wrong rhythm, so I'm just gonna move that over. So up until this point, we've only used 3-note chords, or what we know as triads. So to get an extended chord, you're literally just gonna continue the same logic of skipping every scale degree and just add it to the existing structure of a triad. Meaning, this is skipping note, that is an extended chord. This is what we call a seventh chord. There are 4 unique notes in a seventh chord. And I'm gonna do the same thing. So the extended chord sounds nice on this first chord. It sounds a little wonky on the second chord, because we're gonna learn that is considered a dominant seventh, and it's a little more like in the jazz, funk type genre, so it kind of throws off the flavor here. But it'll probably sound good on that. So maybe we can substitute that for a different note, or higher. And now I'm just playing around with the top notes. And essentially, if you just literally add in another, again, in the scale to a triad, just another note that's not in the triad, you've already made an extended chord. So if you kind of play around with a melody, you're making extensions by default. Moving on to R&B. So here we also have extended chords. Let's take a listen. So for this one, the things I wanted to highlight were the extended chords, obviously, but also that the fact that even though we're in A minor or C major, we don't hit either A minor or C major. So chord progressions don't always have to resolve to one. In fact, it kind of gives this kind of suspense loop, or this kind of unresolved feeling if you don't necessarily hit the one chord. So let's see how we construct this chord progression for the instrument. I have an instance of Serum, a pretty standard instance, just like a kind of sine wave with some distortion. And then we've got a instance of Shaper Box, which is gonna give us that volume pumping we like. So now I'm gonna go into a new Midi clip. For this one, we're only gonna use 2 measures, so I'm gonna length 2 measures. This progression is considered 6-5-4. I'm thinking of it in A minor, but we never hit the 1. We never hit the A minor. 6, again, A minor's right here, A. So if I say 6, I'm gonna go down, 6. I'm gonna start building my triad, which is, again, skipping every other scale note. So that's our first triad. I'm gonna 1 octave up with shift arrow key up. And what we're gonna do is actually we're gonna take this top note, skip a scale degree, so it's every other white note, and that creates our 7th chord. If we go another one, that's considered a 9th chord. Can sound really nice. This is considered an 11th chord. And then a 13th chord is a little too high, let's go down. That's a 13th chord. So again, our triad is here. That's F, A, C, that's F. Again, that's a triad. There's 3 unique notes in that. As soon as we move it down and there's like that 4th unique note, F, A, C, E, face, that is now our 7th chord. Major 7th, it's nice and happy. There's that distance at the bottom we talked about. But then I can move up F, G to the non-scale. So F, A, C, there's a G in there now. That's considered a 9th chord, because that's like the 9th scale degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So for this progression, I'm gonna do 7ths though. Actually, let's mix it up a little bit. We'll do a 9th. I'm gonna duplicate this, use arrow key down. Now, we want the E chord here. This is 6. We're going to 5. We actually want this down on the white keys. That F sharp's also out of scale, so I'm going to put this down to E. So this is technically just a triad. And maybe put in the 4 chord here. So maybe option drag this. This is D, So I know stack it, every other note. And I maybe make this into a 7th chord by adding that C in there. So that's 4 unique notes. I could hear, this is nice. It's like fitting 3 chords in the span of 2 measures is sometimes nice too. It doesn't always have to be symmetrical. All right, moving on to lo-fi, which I think is the most complex chord progression here. So for this, I have a Whirly V from V Collection on this nice Leslie Slow preset. And let's take a look at the progression. This is considered in C major, but we're using a lot of non-scale notes or accidentals in what we call like borrowed chords. And this will actually just kind of make it a more jazzy sound, which we're familiar with in lo-fi as well. So let's go ahead and make this from scratch. We're gonna put in 4 measures. And I start with that C. So C major 7th is C. We know it's a kind of like a happy chord. Let's hear that. I kind of rolled the chords a little bit, so I kind of put this like motion here. Like as the fingers are rolling across the keys, you stagger the notes just a hair. Using command drag, you can get off the grid on Ableton. So I'm gonna duplicate that and move it up. Now, the difference in this chord is that we're gonna take it and make it minor. So we're gonna have that E there. We're gonna leave this here. We're gonna take this down to B, and we're gonna double the B on the bottom. It gives a nice jazzy feeling. And that really resolves nicely to this minor. So this is kind of a different mood, but then I can find like a stronger, maybe sadder mood. And then we're gonna go to the 6, which is again 1. We've got the flat 2's the home base of this chord, and then 6. So I'm gonna just build a minor 9th chord. I'm gonna stagger the notes. And this one, I'm gonna use a 9th chord. So I'm gonna keep that B on the top. That's the one thing about this chord progression, as you can tell, is there is a pedal tone, or what we consider a tone that stays in the same spot throughout the phrase or the chord progression, and it's on this B. Rather than going to like a happy 4 chord or this kind of, we want to keep it dark, so I'm going to do the F, I'm going to do this A flat, C, that's a minor 4 chord. Now, I don't think that's the right inversion I like, so I'm going to do that, and maybe this right here. Actually, I'm going to take the F and put it on the bottom here. Yeah, make it a 9th chord, like a minor 9. So that's A, F, A flat, C. This is the 1st, the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, the 9th. All right, moving on to progressive house. So for this one, I really kind of wanted to show an 8 measure long chord progression. I love progressive house for the chord progression specifically because a lot of times the progressions are really long and they go over a long, like, if you will, plot arc or story arc. For this, we're in A minor and we're using pretty much everything in the scale, so it's a little easier in that sense. I have a instance of Serum with an arpeggiator. We already kind of went over what an arpeggio was, and now you know that the arpeggiator is going to take a chord and play the notes individually, so that kind of sounds nice. I definitely think you could layer this with a pad or something like that if we were actually making a track. Let's go ahead and make the progression now. So I'm going to do measure length 8, and we'll do A minor as the beginning. So again, A minor, but in an inversion. We move the top note of the chord to the bottom. And what we're gonna do is duplicate, and this is called voice setting. So this FAC is now that 6th chord, very low resistance as far as movement. It's only moving one note, and that forms a new chord. That's kind of nice. And I'm gonna try to keep the notes the same as I see. The D chord down here. Right here. And actually, I think that's where I wanted to get to, so I'm gonna move this D up here. And maybe duplicate this. And to make a little variance, I'm actually gonna invert this as well. Let me put this down to C. So now that I've duplicated this phrase, I'm gonna try to add variations with inversions. That can make your phrasing sound longer. So I'm gonna take this first, so I'm gonna take the 2nd chord here, this F major chord, F, A, C. I'm gonna take that C and use Shift arrow key down. This is where I'm gonna change chords. I'm gonna take this to the B, I'm gonna take this to the G. So this is now forming a G major, G, B, D, or we're thinking this is 1 here, so 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the 7 chord, major, happy. And actually, I kind of like this D on the bottom here, but what I want to do is I felt the top line of the chord needed to go higher. It was kind of lifting, it was raising. So we want to make sure that kind of melody of the chord, or the voice leading as it's known, is, you know, musical as well. So this is going C, D, E. It kind of feels like it's going higher. And this chord progression probably honestly be 16 measures, where it's like even grows more. And the last progression I have is future bass. For the instrument, I've got an instance of Serum, which is like a super saw. And for this future bass one, I've kind of combined a lot of the things we've learned throughout this video, which is using extensions, so not just 3-note chords, using inversions, so different order of the chords, and also trying to play with the rhythm, the length of the chord. So let's take a listen. So this is considered the C major. Now we're in C major. I think we're in a little happier mood towards the end of this video. Right now I needed 4 measures, so I'm gonna do length 4. And I said we're in C major, so I'm gonna take a C, take it and do a full measure. I'm gonna probably shorten it to fit in, so it kind of cuts off with the snare. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna take this, shorten it, 1 octave down actually, so that the chord stops on the snare, sustains, again, very important. And then where that kick comes in on B2, I'm not gonna do it right on every measure. I could, but I'm gonna do that. Take this option, drag it to start on the 3. But notice, again, that G sharp is not really in the key of C major, it's accidental. You're gonna take the G sharp, move it down. Take that D sharp, move it up. And I'm gonna take this, shorten it. I'm gonna take the G, keep everything the same, move that down. And that is actually 2 quick chords. We're gonna take that D. If we move it up, it's just a standard triad. It's a G, B, D. It's not an extension or anything. But the fact that it's inverted after a chord sounds nice. For the 3rd measure, we're gonna take that E chord, we're gonna keep it on that 3, but then I'm gonna kind of boost it up a little bit up here. Make a little melody, right? And then it kind of feels natural right there. Take that structure. And then I feel that resolution to the G chord again. So G, we'll put it on D. And then I could almost hear this going even a little bit higher towards the end of the phrase. Yeah, it's really nice when the top line of the chord kind of reaches higher towards the end of the phrase. I personally love it when it does that. Cool, so that was an overview of how to start making chord progressions in a wide variety of genres. Hopefully you learned something, whether it's from types of chords, maybe inverting chords, the rhythm of the chords. Be sure to download the free Midi progressions, as well as the sounds used in the tutorial. The link will be in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We'll be releasing new production videos weekly. And as always, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day. Until next time, I'll see y'all later.